Welcome to the Women Leaders Association Daily Member Podcast, where we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. I'm your host, Julianne Kirkland. And in each Daily Member Podcast, we will pick out a great speaker from one of our meetings that we thought you would enjoy. You can access hundreds of recent speakers, book summaries, great articles, and more at no additional charge through your membership portal. If you would like to get involved in a Women Leaders Association mastermind group or find a networking group near you, or if you just need access to the membership portal, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com to be connected. Now let's tune in for this incredible message.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much, Ginger. My name is Oanh McClure, and I have the distinct honor of being your first keynote speaker for today's event. What I'd like to do is I always like to start things off with a little bit of positivity. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to go around the horn and have every member of the audience actually share a little round robin icebreaker. Maybe share me your name, your company, and let's say maybe your favorite color in middle school. Just kidding. There's like a ton of people on the line. I would never make you guys do that. But what I will do is, because you're probably wondering who I am and why I'm up here, I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit about myself. First and foremost, as we had mentioned, my name is Oanh McClure. I am the proud product of two Vietnamese war refugee parents. I am the product of two people who were taken with the aid of the US military from war-torn jungles of Vietnam to just outside the Arctic Circle in inland Alaska, where I was born and raised, and I'm speaking to you from today. While that tells you where I'm from, I'm not sure that really tells you who I am. So I'll tell you that probably the most accurate description I have ever heard of myself is an assassin with a smile. And that was from a former CRO of mine on stage. And why I think that's such an accurate description is because not only does that make me the uniquely neon, but incredibly precise combination of my parents, it really represents their two very personalities, specifically an academically gifted street fighter from North Vietnam, as well as a graceful, elegant, selfless, and stunningly beautiful socialite mother. Professionally, I can tell you that with great pride, I have managed to build some of the fastest growing partner ecosystems and highest performing teams within the entire cybersecurity space. My teams and I have consistently produced triple-digit year-over-year growth and some of the most incredibly impressive individual contributors and future leaders that I have ever had the honor of meeting in my career. And several of them are on the line and in the audience with us today. I will tell you, because we're talking about this right now, I'll tell you a little secret about me professionally. And ironic that I'm giving a presentation on leadership is that I am not particularly fond of managing. I'm also not particularly fond of management, particularly bad management. And in fact, one of the things that I abhor greatest in this entire world, which some of you may be familiar with, is managing up. And that's managing up in male-dominated environments where I have had to fight and claw for every inch of freedom that I had earned and still not received. And this is managing up with people who know less, care less, and do less than me and my team. And so I'll tell you that leadership's not really for the faint of heart, and managing is not for the faint of character. But because of that, you might be asking yourself, well, Oanh, if that's the case, why are there so many bad managers and so few strong leaders? Well, I can tell you exactly why, and I can show you exactly why. And it's this. This eyesore right here is the visual representation of what Michael Singer, author of a book called The Untethered Soul, a great book if you haven't read it, calls the unwelcome roommate. And that unwelcome roommate is a collective of internalized, overwhelming voices of self-doubt, constantly telling you all the reasons you will fail before you even start. We know it colloquially as imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome, I say, is the temptation to succumb to something called ateliophobia. It's the temptation to succumb to the absolute overwhelming fear of being anything less than perfect. And imposter syndrome, by definition, is a cognitive bias where the best and brightest of us constantly doubt our own abilities, knowledge, and competence. It's where those of us who do doubt our abilities, even though they are proven, our knowledge, even though it is vast, and our competence in our own fields of expertise. But there's a flip side that not too many people talk about. And that flip side is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the Dunning-Kruger effect tells us that the least of us, the densest and dullest and most apathetic of us, severely overestimate their own abilities, knowledge, and competence. So again, let me go back to the start and say that those of us who do and do it well constantly question ourselves at every turn. And that's what imposter syndrome is. Whereas those who don't never question themselves once. And that's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I will tell you that the first time I found out that that phenomenon had a name, I found that to be the most liberating and inspiring thing I had ever heard. Because if the most intentionally vacant human that I have ever met in my life could fall upwards his entire career and look in the mirror and see nothing but sheer greatness, then I realized I can look in the mirror and see maybe a shred of freaking greatness too. On the flip side, I've had managers who were once empty vessels and somewhere along the way got filled with nothing but platitudes and toxic leadership rhetoric. And if he can look in the mirror and see nothing but a world-changing, impactful leader, then I can look in the mirror and maybe see a shred of a freaking good leader too. So all of this is just to say, as we go into things, that this keynote, before your imposter syndrome flares up, this keynote is not going to be about what you need to fix in yourself or what you need to become. It's not going to be about a pipe dream that you envision 10 to 15 years from now. It's going to be about how to maximize and embrace what makes you so great today. It's going to be about embracing the good in you and then weaponizing that greatness into something that can help the people who need you the most. So we're going to change the title of this keynote and we're going to call it Being the Authentic Leader That Your Team Needs. You know, when I was preparing for this keynote, I had surveyed and interviewed leaders from all over the country, asking them exactly what an authentic leader looks like to them. And tell me about one of the best leaders that you've ever worked under, for, or around, and tell me how would you describe them? And in their answers, I found three consistent themes. The first one was who the person was, and we'll call that their character. The second was what their interpretation of the role of a leader was. We'll call that their approach. And the third one was how did they do the job? How did they implement that vision? We'll call that the implementation. And then we'll do that through something I call my 10 commandments of authentic leadership. So category 1, your character, how to demonstrate authenticity as a leader. Commandment number 1, be yourself. Now, if y'all didn't see this coming, I hate to break it to you, it's been in every slide and it is the name of the actual keynote. So be authentically yourself is the first and foremost component of authentic leadership. And if I may, I'd like to share with you guys one of my favorite quotes of all time by the wonderful poet E.E. Cummings. And you've probably seen it before. But he says, to be nobody but yourself in a world that's trying its damnedest day and night to make you like everybody else is the hardest fight that you'll ever have to fight, and never stop fighting. And so what I'm asking you right now when I'm saying that you need to be authentically yourself is actually going to be both the easiest thing that anyone ever asks of you and one of the hardest things anyone will ever ask of you. It's easy because being yourself, you're already that, you're already you. You know nothing else in this world like you know yourself, and nobody else is more of an expert on you than you are. But on the flip side of that, it is one of the hardest things anyone will ever ask of you because it requires an immense amount of self-awareness. And it not only requires self-awareness, but it requires you to shed all of the caustic and corrosive criticisms that you've received in your life that you've internalized along the way. It requires you to let go of things so you can embrace your strengths and weaponize those strengths. And it also takes an incredibly painful amount of self-awareness because you need to be so painfully cognizant of every single one of your shortcomings. Because while you may be the kindest and most generous human being that's ever walked across the earth, if you're a little bit flaky, you need to recognize and be cognizant and acknowledge your flakiness and how that might impact your team. So while they're off defending your kindness and generosity, you also need to realize that you can't sit back and defend the fact that you accidentally ghost people from time to time. So what I'm going to ask of you today is, number one, I need you to embrace the things that make you great, embrace your strengths, drop that imposter syndrome. Number two, I'm going to need you to acknowledge the bad, the shortcomings, the things that we'll call them areas of growth. And last but not least, stop calling the sides of yourself that you don't like ugly. Commandment number two, hold fast. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this term, it's actually an old Dutch term for sailors, letting them know they need to hold tight to the ropes and riggings of a ship so that they don't get thrown overboard on rough waters. But now it's primarily used nowadays as a term to mean hold tight to your principles, hang on tight, because as most leaders will tell you at some point in your career, and especially as female leaders, you will find out that unfortunately they will come for you. They will come for you from all angles. They'll come for you from top down, and it'll start with passive aggression, microaggressions, insults, then to threats, then to ultimatums. And they'll say things to you like, maybe you should take some time and determine if you have what it takes to be a leader here. And in the exact same breath, ask you to do something that is the direct opposite of your entire moral character. And when they do, hold fast. And from bottom up, they'll pressure you. Like toddlers who are learning their boundaries for the first time, your direct reports will try your patience and they will test your tolerance. They will push your boundaries to see what you're going to accept, not accept, and what you will notice and not notice. And when they do try you, hold fast. And now that's not to say that you can impose your moral beliefs on someone or use your role as a leader to teach them like your children. But as corporate darling Jocko Willink, former leader of SEAL Team 6, used to say, you have to be vigilant and you have to stay on guard. And you have to hold the line on the seemingly most insignificant things that shouldn't matter at all, but that they do. And I say this because if you feel like you don't have the strength to hold that line, as a friendly reminder from the quote on the slide, it says strength does not come from physical capacity. It comes from an indomitable will. So when that moment comes that they try you and they come for you and they test you from top down or bottom up, I want to tell you to not only stay vigilant, but to hold fast to your principles. Okay, so I call this slide stay humble or get humbled, because I think the Jocko Willink quote does not quite roll off the tongue the same way. But I had a great debate with someone over this slide because they looked at it and they told me that this slide doesn't represent leadership, because if it did, that red piece would be a king piece or a queen piece and not a pawn. To which I told them respectfully, I violently disagree with your assessment. And the reason I said that is because, as any real leader knows, they are just one of the team. A queen piece or king piece would designate not leadership, but authority. It would designate a dictatorship, someone who leads with brute force or command, whereas a leader understands that they are just one of the team. They are just one of many. And the reason I say that is because I would like to provide you all a friendly reminder that as we lead, sometimes it's easy to forget that with no team, there is no leader. And so there may be times that as a leader, when you forget this, you might try to brute force success. You might try to brute force the next moment. But what I'm here to tell you is that, like Jocko Willink says, you cannot make people listen to you. You can't make them execute. I mean, it's a temporary solution for a simple task, sure. But in order to implement real change or to drive people to accomplish something truly complex or difficult or dangerous, you can't make people do those things. You have to lead them. And so at your next impasse as a leader, I encourage you to remember this photo and remember that you don't stand above the rest. You are not cut from a different cloth. You are not a different breed of human. You are just one of many. And when you stand alone, you will fail. That's all there is to it. If you stand alone, you will fail, because without a team, there is no leader. But if you stand together, you just may win. Okay, so you're welcome. In 3 slides, I've just taught you how to become a perfect human being, an apex leader. But now we're going to go into what exactly the role entails and what exactly it means to be an authentic leader. First step is to let it go. So for those of you unfamiliar, there's this series on Apple TV called Ted Lasso, where this Midwestern college football coach, who's kind of a big folksy goofball, gets flown to the UK almost as a prank to coach a professional soccer team called AFC Richmond. And he uses this Midwest folksy nature of his to teach them very poignant life lessons in a very deep way. And one of those life lessons that he taught in an episode is when he brought the entire professional soccer team deep into the belly of the Richmond sewer system. And while he was down there, he kind of drew a comparison and said, you know, we may be surrounded by a lot of poop down here, but it feels like we're surrounded by a lot of poop up there too. He coaches his team, telling them the importance of building a network of tunnels where it allows you to borrow from others what you lack, keep what it is that serves you, and let go of what doesn't. And so when I say this, and I say, let it go, I mean, I need you guys to let go of the perception that you have to control your people. Let go of the posturing of what it looks like to be a good leader, and let go of bad advice that you received from toxic managers in the past. It means letting go of regrets and that stupid comment that you made 16 years ago that still plagues you at 1 a.m. It means letting go of resentments of people who have done you wrong in the past, and of ideals like coulda, woulda, shouldas, and how it all should have been. I need you to let it all go, because it's poopy. So you got to let it flow. And now I want you guys to take a moment and kind of reframe your picture of what leadership is. Okay. Instead of thinking of things as you're someone's boss or you're someone's manager, I want you guys to consider yourself like a guide, and you're taking your crew on a hike on chaotic and unpredictable terrain full of political perils, right? And if you push your crew too hard, someone might trip and fall and sprain an ankle, in which it'll ruin the trip for the entire team. If you don't push them hard enough, they might not make it to their destination by nightfall. And so that shows us that leadership exists in this delicate balance of nuance between extremes, right? And Jocko Willink, who, again, I will quote many, many times, says that a leader must be calm, but never robotic. He or she has to be confident, but never cocky, brave, but not foolhardy. And they have to have a competitive spirit, but be a gracious loser. And he said that he learned that good leaders never make excuses, but instead they figure out a way to do it, get the job done, and win. So I'm going to say all of that in a different way, maybe from a negative perception to a positive perception. And I'm going to say it like this: real recognizes real. If you want your team to give you full, transparent honesty, you have to be honest with your team. If you want your team to respect you, you need to respect your team. And if you want your team to follow you, then you need to lead your team. You can't just exist. And so what I'm saying is that the number one complaint I received throughout all of my interviews was about poor managers who didn't practice what they preached. If they wanted honesty, they weren't honest with their team. And so I'm saying that if you want a team of high performers who will run through walls for you, you yourself have to perform at a high level. If you want a team of high performers who will run 90 miles an hour all day, then girl, you best be stretching, because that means that you yourself need to be running a minimum of 100 miles a day, all day, day. Facta non verba. Guide people with your actions, not your words. Facta non verba. So there's actually a meme for this, for protect and serve. And the meme is of a giant umbrella that represents the manager, and their team sits underneath the umbrella. And it demonstrates that all of the rainfall that the umbrella protects the team from are all the things that prevent people from doing their job. That's distractions, noise, politics, busy work, fire drills, all the things that take people away from the actual task and job at hand. And to serve people, it also shows that it is your job to communicate clearly with your team so they know what the job is. be resourceful enough to provide them with the tools that they need to get the job done. And understand that leadership is only effective in the format of servant leadership. Again, not authority, but leading. And even though that is a great meme, I just didn't quite feel like anything visually did the sense of protect and serve justice, like the majestic German Shepherd. Mine's sleeping over there. So that I could remind you that at the end of the day, when I say protect and serve, it's not just because without a leader or without a team, there is no leader, but more specifically that your people are not here for you. You are here for your people. So your job is to protect and serve. Okay, so now we've talked about your character. We've talked about the approach to the job. Let's talk about how to actually do it. First and foremost, I need you guys to ask all the questions. And the reason I say that is because I don't want you to ever let your ego get in the way and feel compelled to provide an answer just because you can. Okay. Most moms probably already know this. And if there's any moms in the audience, this might be a painfully familiar situation. Say your 5-year-old son walks into the room screaming, "Mom, where are the scissors?" And before you can answer, he follows up with, "Mom, how do you get gum out of someone's hair?" You're not going to immediately hand him the scissors and say, "Oh, well, you know, Good Housekeeping said once that you can use mayonnaise, peanut butter, or ice to get gum out of hair." No, you're not going to give him an answer. You're going to grab his head and check his hair. And not only that, if there's no gum in his hair, you're going to turn around and you're ask, "Why are you asking that question? Where's your sister?" And then go check his sister's hair, because you don't want to provide an answer if you don't know the full picture. And not only that, but I need you to ask all the questions and not let your ego stand in the way of when you don't know. It's an opportunity to learn. And to not embrace that would be a shame. Because when you need to ask all the questions, if you don't know the answer, you have the opportunity to build an allyship with someone and to go to the people who are most likely responsible for cleaning up the mess you make if you do it wrong or if you answer the wrong question. So I recommend tag those people in. And 9 out of 10 times, they won't be annoyed that you're asking the question. They'll actually be very flattered and pleased and feel respected that you took the time to understand how to do it correctly so that they wouldn't have to clean up your mess. Organize your thoughts. I actually organize everything. I had a leader, my functional executive at Zscaler actually, during a mentorship session, tell me that the greatest lesson he ever learned was learning to process and internalize the first 75% of everything you have to say and only let 25% come out. If I'm honest, I'm pretty sure that was just his way of telling me that I talk too much, which I do, area of growth for me. But I will say that internalizing and processing everything before it comes out of your mouth is the crux to clear communication. I will also say that you need to organize your team, because you need to ensure that they're all running in the right direction towards the same goal. Otherwise, you're just going to be herding cats all day. And you need to organize your evidence, because like I said before, when they come for you, because they will, when you're holding fast, it helps tremendously and is an absolute game changer if you have the receipts to back you up. Okay. This is what holding fast looks like. This is what standing your ground looks like. This is what protecting your team looks like. Next up, decentralize and delegate. All this comes down to is this is a primary strategy of every successful military mission that the US military has ever had. Okay. The goal of a leader is to eventually work themselves out of a job. And if you take it in the literal sense, we'll say that if I want to be promoted from a director to a VP, I need to have my successor for the director role at the ready, because if not, I'm going to be responsible for 2 jobs now. And that means if my attention is divided 50-50, I will fail at both. Okay. Jocko Willink, I'm going to quote a whole bunch of things right now, says that the goal of every leader should be to work themselves out of a job. And that this means that leaders need to be heavily engaged in the mentoring and training of their junior leaders to prepare them to step up and assume greater responsibilities. Not only that, he says that some of the boldest and most successful plans in history have not come from the senior ranks, but came from those frontline leaders that have been recently trained. And that senior leaders just simply had the courage to accept and run with those ideas. Because in chaotic and dynamic and rapidly changing environments, leaders at all levels must be empowered to make decisions, and decentralized command is a key component to victory. And last but not least, be a mosaic. Commandment 10 out of 10. And the reason I say this, and this is a quote from me, no one is born knowing everything and no one dies having learned nothing, is because in a lot of ways, we're taught that it's a whole lot easier to paint everything one broad stroke of color, right? You can walk into a house and paint everything grayish or this weird brown color called mushroom soup. And that's the easiest thing to do. But at the end of the day, it actually doesn't serve anyone at all. And in the Harvard Business Review's article about authentic leadership, they quote a man named Wilson Meisner, who says, to borrow from one source is plagiarism, but to borrow from many is research. And so what I want you to do is I want to challenge you to borrow from as many resources as possible to do your research and to put all those little pieces of information together, however imperfect they may be. They may be a little cracked or marred or scarred, but put them all together and build the beautiful mosaic that is you and your team. Because while individual pieces may not be flawless, when you put it together, it makes a unique, one-of-a-kind masterpiece. So I need you to borrow from everyone. I need you to ask all the questions, and I need you to incorporate the best of everyone you work with into the mosaic that you are. And if you are lacking something, borrow it from someone else. If someone intimidates you because of their powerful presence, borrow some of that power. If someone intimidates you because they're freaking brilliant, then go steal some of them smarts. Whatever it is, I need you, if you're going to be a leader, not to tell yourself that you are less than, but rather to collect those pieces that maybe you are an in-progress mosaic, you and your team. And know that whoever and whatever you are, as you showed up today to listen to this keynote, you are already more than enough to be the authentic leader that your team needs.
Hey, my friend, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, be sure to rate, review, and share your biggest takeaway. And if you're wanting more, you can access hundreds of recent speakers, book summaries, great articles, and more at no additional charge through your membership portal. You can also get involved in a Women Leaders Association mastermind group or networking group near you. Or if you just need to access your membership portal, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com to be connected. Because here at Women Leaders Association, we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. That's all for today, my friends. Bye for now.